Hello friends and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. We start our video with a story in which our OP ran into an evil landlord who liked to brag about being insanely rich. Let's see how it turned out. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. My ex-landlord is a millionaire, so he shouldn't mind. My dad came into the possession of two old beat-up bikes. They were really crappy, but we were going to Frankenstein them together to form one really cool bike. I placed them in my backyard on the outer wall of my house. I assured my dad that they'd be okay there because these were too crappy to get stolen. Lo and behold, they went missing. My neighbor told me he saw the landlord back there, so I asked my landlord if he knew where my bikes went. He responded by shouting in my face, "I'm a millionaire! Why would I want to take that junk?" I told him those bikes were special to me because it was a project with my dad. He mocked me and told me he didn't want to have that trash on his property, a veiled admission of guilt. Then he threatened to kick my neighbor out in the street for lying, and I could do it too. Quick, I know people. You'd be out by the end of the week. I am super pissed and don't have a deposit responsibility on the room. I took a knife and stabbed the walls, effed up all the plaster. I put the knife in the door jambs and pried. Utilities were included, so I made sure he would always have to spend a pretty penny on them. Enjoy the damage, D-bag. Spend some of your millions fixing that. This is why you always weigh the costs and benefits of any action. Good work. And our next story. Stop talking to you? Okay. This all happened last year at a job I loved because it was incredibly easy. I worked part-time at a law school, in an office, where a truly busy day involved maybe 3 hours of work out of the up to 10 I'd need to be at my desk. The rest of the time, I was free to do whatever I liked as long as I got my tasks done. I had a supervisor for about 8 months, but he was fired for lack of attention to detail. Grade entry was a big part of both of our jobs, and he was consistently making typos and failing to correct them. The importance of grade entry will come up again in this story. After my supervisor was fired, we got a temp to fill the position and to cover the hours I wouldn't be there, so I was told by the dean of the department that I could work as many hours as I was able to until the new full-time replacement was hired. These extra hours would be part of the temp's training, and I could even get overtime if I worked enough. So I'm happy as can be and excited to work with this temp. That is, until I meet her. This temp was the most completely incompetent person I've ever encountered in a workplace. She was incredibly slow to finish tasks, would ask the same questions again and again, and was extremely dismissive of me. She liked to print out everything, and I do mean everything. We had a highly confidential list of students' names and their ID numbers, confidential for grading purposes, that if people were allowed to see, could result in massive problems for the university. She regularly, despite my frequent reminders that we should absolutely not print that document, print sections as she needed to make edits to the document. The university had a pool of temps that they'd contact whenever a position opened up, with the option that the temps could transition to full-time if they did a great job. She was convinced that she'd be staying in the job after the temp period was up, despite having the worst computer skills I've ever seen in another person. Because she was temping in a position above mine, but I was training her on many tasks, was very resistant to taking my advice or directions. I once explained to her that we don't save junk mail or spam flyers for the professors, and she just brushed me off and went to deliver a stack of junk mail to the dean. So rudely that another professor noticed and was shocked at how she spoke to me. It didn't bother me that she was rude as long as the work got done, which I ensured it did. Over time, she started being more directly hostile to me and taking tasks from me as I was working on them. I had a box of TA reviews under my desk that I needed to organize and index that one professor had expressly given me to work on. While I was out to lunch, she took the box from under my desk and finished the task. The professor asked for 1 to 2 sentence summaries. She wrote this professor full letters for each one with salutation, signature, and date. The stealing of jobs was annoying because there really wasn't much to do in the office, but I was going to put up with it. The big problem and the reason for this post happened when I went away to a conference for a week. Our grading software was, to put it politely, a piece of effing garbage. The software was written in the 90s and was incredibly bare bones. Many editing tools were hidden away in weird places, and the software did not actually require you to save anything. It was automatically saved on closing the window. Closing the window prompted a pop-up asking to confirm that you were closing it and ask if you wanted to make a backup. Backups were not connected in any way, so editing a backup would not change any other files. So I avoided making backups whenever possible to make sure I only changed the correct document. I showed the temp how to add grades, showed her the pop-up many times, and told her not to make backups. Furthermore, I told her that she had to add all the grades to the right document, otherwise the grades would be missing from the final reports. She smiled her bland smile and assured me that she knew what to do. So away I went. I got back a week later and opened my email to find many emails from professors in the department addressed to both of us, with grades to be added to the document. She had not included me on any of the replies, so I went to the grade software to check if they'd all been added and found several that were missing. In addition, I found about 8 new duplicates of the original grade file in that folder. I asked her if she entered all the grades, and she told me she had. I told her that I found several that were not entered in the right document, and she told me to stop looking at the grade file because all the grades were entered and to leave it alone. Every question I asked her, what documents did you add grades to? How many professors' grades have you added here? Why did you make all these duplicate files? Was met with silence and a glare. Finally, she put up her hand, turned away from me, and said, "Do not talk to me anymore." My jaw dropped for a few seconds, then I calmed down and complied. Sure, I didn't talk to her anymore. I did, however, send an email to the dean explaining what had happened, describing the attitude I'd had to deal with from the temp, and expressing my concerns that the grades were incorrectly entered. I was willing to work out the issue with just me and the temp and not make a report of her incompetence at all, but she specifically told me not to talk to her, so I had no other option. As it happened, the dean was in a staff meeting with all the tenured professors of the department, and the professor who'd seen the temp rebuff my advice and talk down to me vouched for the things I explained in the email. I got a response within an hour saying that the temp's time in the office was ending, and for the final 2 weeks she'd be there, she'd be barred from entering grades. I also got to log even more hours cleaning up the mess she made of our grade files, where I found that on top of entering grades in the wrong files, she'd managed to delete a column of grades entirely from the original document. I fixed this and everything else without a word to the temp. On her last day, she waited until I was away from my desk, but within earshot, to thank a professor for hiring her and for the opportunity, then stomp out of the office without a word to me at all. Oh well. This is a scary story because those law students are paying, $120,000 to get this degree? And their grades are being handled by someone who either doesn't get it or doesn't care? Glad you were able to deal with the situation, OP. And our last story. They kicked out my sister-in-law, so I forced them to sell the same house. My sister-in-law got pregnant when she was 17. My wonderful in-laws kicked her out of the house then and there. They told her to leave the house and threw her out at 8 p.m. with no money or even any documents, and her father took the car keys from her too. She had to walk 8 miles to get to our place. She was crying, and we took her in. This is horrible behavior, but my husband and I would have just cut them off if it was all they did, but they doubled down. They refused to hand over any of the documents, and my brother-in-law had to go over and barge into their house to get them. They also cleaned up all the money in a joint account. She'd saved up $8,000 working part-time all through high school. They took the money and also sold her car, which was in their name. They were trying to ruin her life as much as they could. My father-in-law is a small-time businessman, and his biggest account was supplying my employer. I had helped him get the contract, and it was very lucrative for him. My employer was a family business, and they treated long-term employees more like family than employees. I was talking to my boss about what happened. He told me that if I could find someone within 5% range of the price my father-in-law offered, they'd make the switch. My father-in-law offered us really great rates. He was very good at his job, but he'd effed up the contract because even though we always bought from him, we weren't obligated to buy from him. We could switch suppliers anytime, but he got complacent and assumed we wouldn't switch suppliers. It took me 6 months of painful searching to find a supplier who could replace him and get us great rates. This was not a major part of my duties, and I'd put in way more hours than normal to find the damn supplier, but when I did find them, I waited for a month before informing my boss. See, my in-laws had been planning to do major renovations for a long time, and it involved tearing down a major portion of their house. I waited until the renovation work had truly started before informing my boss. We started to get supplies from the new supplier the next month itself. It crushed his business. It effed his unit economics, and he had to scramble to find new customers. They ended up having to sell their house to save the business, and they didn't get a good rate for it because the house was, well, half torn down when they sold it. My in-laws did try to get money from my brother-in-law, but he told them to F off. My father-in-law is a decent businessman, and he did crawl his way out of the hole they dug for themselves, but even 8 years later, they still haven't bought a new house. I haven't heard if they're still sour about what happened. I mean, I was just doing my job, and if they had just kicked her out, they would have still had the house. The whole point of parents legally having something in their name that's actually the child's is based off the assumption that no parent would ever needlessly take from their child. People are horrible, and that assumption's just wrong. For real, some people just don't deserve to be parents. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.